Hello, and welcome to this breakout session, Providing Accessible Educational Materials, or what we call AIM, in Oklahoma from pre-K-12 through post-secondary. I'm Cynthia Curry, Project Director for the National AIM Center at CAST. In this session, we'll highlight the progress being made in Oklahoma to build and sustain a coordinated system for providing AIM and accessible technologies for learners with disabilities across early learning, K-12, higher ed, and workforce training. You'll take away strategies and resources that can be adapted for immediate use in your own state. I'm delighted to be co-presenting with my colleagues from Oklahoma Able Tech, who will introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Gretchen Cole-Lade. I'm a retired special ed teacher. I spent my entire career working and supporting students with significant delays. And I then went on and taught at OSU, helping early childhood educators prepare to meet the needs of students with disabilities in inclusive classrooms. And I am now the state leadership training specialist at Oklahoma Able Tech. Oklahoma Able Tech is the state's Assistive Technology Act program, and our mission is to increase access to and acquisition of assistive technology to all individuals with disabilities across the state of Oklahoma.
And my name is Lissa Prince. I am the ICT Accessibility Program Manager with Oklahoma Able Tech. Gretchen just mentioned that our mission is to provide AT services and devices. And one thing that we do to support that mission is to ensure that everything that we encounter that is sent to us is accessible. So that is where my expertise comes in. I am certified as an IAAP Certified Professional of Web Accessibility and have been since 2018. And I came to accessibility kind of through an interesting path, but I don't think it's super unique. I was actually training to be a librarian with an MLS, Master's of Library and Information Science degree, and ended up finding accessibility and falling in love with it. So now I am here trying to make sure everything we put out and we encounter is accessible.
Great. Thanks, Gretchen and Lissa. I'm excited to be sharing a stage with the two of you while we talk about a little bit about the National AIM Center and then more specifically what's happening in Oklahoma. So a little bit about the center. Our goal is to increase both the availability and the use of AIM and accessible technology for all learners who need them across the lifespan. And to do that, we build the capacity of states, districts, and other agencies such as early childhood programs, higher ed institutions, workforce development, families, and publishers and developers to provide and support the use of AIM and accessible technologies. And the bar we set is that learners will be provided and use these accessible materials and technologies in a timely manner. Without timely access, learners with disabilities are at risk of not having independence, lacking participation, and not making progress in the curriculum or reaching their goals. This visual is intended to ground our presentation in the importance of a state system coordinating across the lifespan to ensure that learners with disabilities have accessible materials and technologies as they progress and transition across early childhood education, K-12, and post-secondary, whether that's higher education or workforce training. The AIM Center provides 3 tiers of technical assistance. Our universal TA is primarily provided through our website at aem.cast.org. There, you'll find a range of resources such as publications, videos, recorded webinars, online modules, and our podcast, The Accessible Learning Experience. Our targeted TA includes products and services specifically for early learning, higher ed, and workforce development audiences. Finally, we provide continuous ongoing intensive TA for 7 states in what we call the National AIM cohort. The goal of our intensive TA is to inform changes in state and local policies, programs, practices, and operations that improve the availability and use of accessible educational materials and technologies for all learners, but especially those with disabilities who need them. This map of the US highlights in orange the 7 states in our AIM cohort. They're Georgia, Missouri, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Oregon, and West Virginia. And here's a model of the structure of our TA for the AIM cohort. Each of the 7 states has a leadership team that represents cross-functional roles of the state education agency, including special ed, general ed, educational technology, assistive technology, curriculum, assessment, data, etc. Each state team is also partnering with 3 or more school districts to collaborate on policy implementation and for feedback on resource development. And then targeted TA is provided to what we call the cohort's interagency collaborative of representatives in early childhood, higher ed, and workforce development from each of the 7 states. You'll see in the corner a series of icons. These represent the AIM Center's quality indicators for providing AIM and accessible technologies. There are 7 quality indicators, and we have critical components aligned to each of the 4 areas of growth and development. The 7 indicators are: 1, to have a coordinated system that includes wide cross-functional representation and a shared vision. 2, to provide AIM and accessible technologies in a timely manner. 3, to ensure that policies are translated to clearly communicated guidelines. 4, to provide learning opportunities for all stakeholders, such as professional development, training, and technical assistance. 5, to continuously collect data on the effective use and the provision of AIM. 6, to use those data for continuous improvement. And 7, to allocate the human, fiscal, and infrastructure resources needed to create and sustain the coordinated system. So with that overview, let's turn to Gretchen and Lissa to talk about how Oklahoma is implementing these quality indicators. The first question for the two of you is, what is Oklahoma's vision of a statewide coordinated system for providing AIM and accessible technologies from early childhood through post-secondary education?
Thanks, Cynthia. And now if we go to the next slide, it sums up Oklahoma's vision for increasing AIM and accessible technologies. This definition of accessible is from the Office of Civil Rights, and it guides all of what we do when we work with early childhood in school districts. And the definition says a person with a disability can acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services. And I'll stick with that for just a moment. When we talk about this, I want you to key in on the word same, that we don't need to modify what our students are engaging in. What we need to do is help support them within their environments. And I love the engage in the same interactions. Cynthia's picture showing the young children all listening and sitting next to each other, and then sitting in a classroom together. We want our students with limited or no verbal communication abilities to be able to interact, to be able to have those same interactions. And then when we go to the right side of that statement, we want 3 things. We want it to be equally effective. We want it to be equally in an equally integrated manner. And then finally, with substantially equivalent ease of use. And so that's our vision, is how do we make that happen? Because what we want is for them to have all of these opportunities as a person without a disability has. So Lissa, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Gretchen. So, I mean, that's our guiding philosophy. And I think to get down more into the nuts and bolts of kind of how we are working on this coordinated system, the first aspect I'll mention is not to expect perfection immediately. This is something that takes time, and you're working with a lot of different groups, obviously, because we know we are looking at the entire lifespan. So what's important is really identifying the players in the state system that help cover the facets for the provision of AIM. So what formats are being used? What educational technology? What assistive technology? And what is the accessibility of that technology? Those are all questions to be asking initially to get you started. Once you figure out who those players are and what they do, you make sure and find out how they're actually providing services within that system. Once you have kind of established those things, the next question to ask yourself is, how are people finding out about these services? So those families of people with disabilities, providers, and those individuals with disabilities, it's not going to make any difference if there's nobody that knows about these services. So those are the gaps that you're trying to fill. So it's really all about finding out where your state is in terms of those audiences and how to actually fill those gaps so that they know what's available to them and how to access it. So again, we're thinking about all ages. We're making sure we're thinking about parents, early childhood providers, educators, related service providers, administrators, institutions of higher ed, career tech centers, state agencies, employers, workforce boards, job centers. So that list gets pretty long, obviously. So I wanted to kind of bring it back down since I just listed a whole bunch of groups, right? We want to make sure and break down into those specific audiences as much as possible. So that's why at Able Tech, we really focus mostly on that early childhood, K through 12, higher ed and workforce development as 4 separate groups. So, maybe eventually we'll reach a point where all 4 of those different systems are coordinated, but right now we're looking at coordinated systems for each of those different groups.
Great. Thanks, Gretchen and Lissa. I think what you just described is a really nice summary of Quality Indicator 1.1 that really shows the array of cross-representation at the state level. And of course, in Oklahoma, the intensive TA that the AIM Center is providing is in partnership with you all, with Able Tech, the ATAC project, while you're also partnering with all of those representatives from the Oklahoma State Department of Education, which makes your situation very unique, but also replicable for other states to adapt. Right. So the next question is for the two of you: how can a state team establish collaborations among multiple agencies to set goals and monitor progress toward a coordinated system for providing AIM and accessible technologies?
This is another great question. When we talked as a team about our response to this question, it all truly came down to forming relationships. That when we talk about multiple agencies, what we need to understand is that there are people within those agencies. And so we need to develop relationships that will then be able to work towards a coordinated system. And so on my part with early childhood and pre-K through 12, I work with our Sooner Start program. That's our program that meets the needs of children birth through 3 within our state. And we work with we work with the consultants, we work with the administrators of the Sooner Start program, with meetings, with trainings, with individual consultations that we work with them. And so we've established a tremendous relationship with the individuals, knowing that there's turnover, knowing that we need to keep up on who is new to their program and how do we reach out to them and inform them about AIM and accessible technologies and how we can support them. Now, within the State Department of Ed, every week, the State Department of Ed sends out a newsletter. I spend every Monday reading this newsletter and finding connections that I can make to reach out to say, hey, can I come and talk with your group? An example that occurred last year was the special ed directors in Oklahoma were having their every August meeting. And I reached out to the person who was in charge of that training, asked if I could come talk with them. Now, they let me talk for 5 minutes. I talked really fast and shared a lot of information. And then I had an informational table. Because of the relationships I formed that day, and then consistently over the year, I found ways to reconnect with the person who is the administrator of their program. I am now going to do a 40-minute presentation on AIM and AT and accessibility this July. And so that is one of the ways that I certainly would encourage everyone to look at how you form these collaborations is through relationships, and not just administrators, but also with teachers and therapists. And I'm trying to get in with the paraprofessional group right now, and check back with me in a year. I'll let you know how those relationships are being formed. So I'll turn it to Lissa now.
Awesome, Gretchen. I love hearing about all the relationships that you have on that side of the house, so to speak. On the accessibility side, we work primarily with higher ed and workforce development right now. So when I speak about our relationships, those are the relationships I'm more speaking to. And I wanted to point out a specific example from the workforce development side. So like Gretchen said, it's all about relationships. Ours started with the Office of Workforce Development and a collaboration with them and Department of Rehabilitation Services here in Oklahoma. So As a part of WIOA, we developed a framework called Access for All that's intended to bring accessibility into all of the workforce boards across the state down through the American Job Centers, or AJCs. You may hear me refer to American Job Centers as AJCs. So we started this partnership to develop a framework for accessibility to help these groups understand how to build, everything accessibly, whether that's digital or physical. So we have kind of started at the centralized point with the Office of Workforce Development, because they had the ability to pass policy that allowed us to kind of latch on to a certification process they were already completing every 2 years. It's called center certification. So what we've kind of done is have them work through and create a new policy that was passed. And then we attached an accessibility assessment or certification to that process as well. So it's done every other year. So the center certification is done 1 year, and then the next year would be the STAR rating framework, which I'll talk more about here in a little bit. But this is, I think, what really gave our process the teeth that it has needed to be so successful. We ran our first assessments this past year in 2021 and had a lot of success with it. We got a lot of great feedback on the process, and we're working to improve it and refine it even more. But so far, it's been really great. It's given us good results, and we're able to use those relationships we've developed with those workforce boards and through that partnership with DRS and Office of Workforce Development to really start establishing accessibility across the state in that workforce side of things.
Great, thanks for the two of you to explain how this continuum fits together. I think two key points that stand out for me is the importance of relationships and not hesitating to build those and looking for opportunities, because we know, and I think all the viewers of this recording also have experienced that oftentimes people aren't coming to us for support with accessibility and AT, but they know that they need it. They just don't know when and where the opportunity arises. And so to take the opportunity to explain, here's a chance, you really do want me to come and support this work, even if we're inviting ourselves. And then the second key point, I think, is how you're talking about 4 different sets of agencies and laws and policies, and that too is very complex. So this is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, 504, Perkins 5, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, the ADA. So having all of these different players who work across agencies and helping piece together how do these laws fit together and who do they serve under what developmental area. So thank you for sort of bringing some practical examples of how that works in the field. The final question is, what resources are available for other states to start building their own coordinated systems for providing AIM and accessible technologies?
Melissa, do you want to take it first?
Sure, I can. So Cynthia, if you'll pull up the resource for the podcast we recorded with CAST. Awesome, thank you. So we actually had the opportunity to, as part of our cohort, record an episode on our 5-star rubric, which promotes accessibility and workforce development on their Accessible Learning podcast. So if you'll go to this, and I know this is going to be included in the resource set provided, but this podcast page has a bunch of our resources for how we developed this, framework. So in the podcast, you'll hear us talk with, it's Allison Robinson, our assistant director here at Oklahoma Able Tech, and project director at DRS, Stephanie Rowe. She will also be included in this podcast, and myself, and we discussed kind of how the rubric came to be. So I gave a little bit of overview in my response to question 2, but if you want to learn quite a bit more about the framework and how it actually functions, feel free to go listen to that podcast. At the bottom of that page, we have our resources. So let's look at the Access for All accessibility framework at the bottom. Thank you. So this will actually be the resource I think that's most useful for all of you, because it's kind of giving you a direct example of how we put this framework into practice. So this is the policy itself that put the rubric into practice. And if we look through the rubric, you'll actually see kind of questions for and some resources embedded in it too. But basically the questions we're asking as far as, how accessible are these American Job Centers? So you'll see kind of our framework for how we assess that. And I think it can help springboard you, to get you some ideas for maybe how to work with any groups. And it's not just in the workforce development system. This model can kind of be applied across the board. But you'll see that we give it a score. So we give it a star rating from 1 to 5. And if you'll pause there on, you're stopped in a good spot. And it's a really small on my screen, so I apologize. I'm going to have to squint for a second. 1 star is compliance. 2 stars is maintenance, 3 stars is prevention, 4 stars is actively responsive, and 5 stars is proactive. So what that means is we're basically applying a continuous improvement model to ensure that we're giving all of these people who are assessing their, their physical accessibility, so how accessible is this ramp? How accessible is this Word document, the website? We're giving them a place to kind of establish themselves and then also to improve. So proactive is probably really difficult to attain, but it also gives you more places to grow. So, even if you're 5-star, we know accessibility is never done. So we want to make sure and kind of give them more room to grow. But this is, I think, a pretty positive example or framework, just because it does let people sort of grow into accessibility as they mature. All right, and I think that's all I wanted to show. So thank you for driving, Cynthia.
All right. And now, as far as resources go that I would like to talk about, again, going back to our collaboration with agencies, I've collaborated with the State Department of Ed when it comes to transition. They decided last year that they would review their handbook. It hadn't been reviewed in many years. And so I was asked to be on the committee. Now, I will share with you that when they first offered the opportunity to me, they said, we'd love for you to add a paragraph. And so I went through this document. You can see it's 93 pages long. AT and AIM and accessibility should not be a section and only addressed there. And so I went through these 93 pages and I embedded the thoughts of AIM and AT and accessibility throughout the document. I provided much more than just a paragraph. And what was wonderful was as the State Department of Ed personnel read through it, it made sense to them. And so they accepted every one of my suggestions. And I look forward to, in another couple of years, going back and let's update it and provide it as a resource, because especially from birth through 18 or 22, depending on how long the student stays in school. What we need to understand is transition isn't just post-secondary to post-secondary life. It's very important, and I'm so thankful for everything that Lissa does. However, we also need to realize that transitions occur between 3 and 4, between the 2 and 3 when they enter into the school system, whenever they go from elementary to middle school. And so what we've done is we've embedded how AIM, if they're using it in one setting, how it needs to transition to the next, and how that can be done so effectively. The other resources we have here in Oklahoma are our assistive technology technical assistance document. And this is from 2021. However, we are right now up to our eyeballs in revising it for our 2022. So stay tuned. That'll be by the end of this month. And then we also have an accessible educational materials technical assistance document. That one is just about done. We've just sent it out for review. And what we provide within both of these documents is an opportunity for professionals to be able to go and read. This is what evidence-based practice says. We quote the quality indicators for AIM within both documents, minimally within assistive technology, and then of course all the way through our AIM TA doc. And so we need to hopefully get the word out to all of our collaborative state agencies that there's a document that helps you be able to reference it. So when someone says, really, is that the way it is? We can say, really, that's the way it is. And here's the document. And so please feel free. I know that we are going to provide this as part of the resource too. Please feel free to read through these documents. And if you have any questions, let us know.
Great. Thank you, Gretchen and Lissa, for those examples from Oklahoma and for reminding people that these resources are out there and ready to be adapted. We do that across the 7 states in the AIM cohort, so we're really benefiting from sharing and exchanging resources across states. And this is an opportunity, obviously, we want to continue to expand and extend our reach. So what we're learning within the AIM cohort, what the National AIM Center will be doing is scaling it up and making these resources available. We have been in this cohort for about 16 to 18 months. And so it's just a matter of holding on until we have more of a collection of these resources that we'll organize and share and build them around the quality indicators to provide additional guidance on how you and your state could build a coordinated system across all of these growth and developmental areas. For some resources that are available on the National AIM Center website, I will share from our homepage. So if you come to aem.cas.org, really the heart of what we've been talking about today is under our Coordinate tab. So here you will find a summary of our quality indicators for providing AIM. They're the same 7 quality indicators, but across each of these 4 areas, K-12, early childhood, higher ed, and workforce development, that's where you will see those quality indicators broken down into unique critical components. So for example, this is the parallel layout and organization for each of these pages, you'll find the critical components for that particular audience, for that particular learner group. And for higher ed, as well as K-12, we have a self-study guide that helps guide folks through better understanding the quality indicators. And also for K-12, we have our AIM pilot. And this is really focused specifically on state education agencies and school districts, preferably partnering together on implementing the quality indicators. But we are also hoping over time to develop similar tools for higher ed, workforce development, and early childhood. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Well, I'm going to hop over to and close out our slide deck with sharing the AIM Center's contact information. And you can reach us by email, most conveniently at aem@cas.org. But we certainly know that people are wanting to reach out and talk with people. We're finding that since the pandemic, we're getting a lot more phone calls. We welcome phone calls. You can reach us at 781-245-2212. So with that, thank you so much, Gretchen and Lissa. Really appreciate your partnership in this work.
Yes, thank you so much, Cynthia.
We appreciate all you've done to put this together, Cynthia. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. And thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please reach out.